everybody. Welcome to our webinar, our July webinar on Job Loss Survival Guide. My name is Marika Vanderheel, and I'm the Community Outreach Supervisor here at ACCC. This is a partner webinar, so we are having a partnership with JVS Boston and MassHire downtown Boston. So we're very happy to have a couple panelists with us. I'm going to introduce them on the next slide, but just so you can see that this is kind of a webinar that we're doing with as a group. So in this, everyone should have received a poll at the very beginning as you're coming in. If you would just take a minute and let us know, where did you hear about this webinar and where did you find us? That's just great information for us to know. So that would be fine. If you can just update that, that would be great. The other piece is this is a Zoom webinar. So on this Zoom webinar, it is your cameras are off and you are muted, and you will be muted for the entire presentation. So what we're going to ask, the way that you can communicate with us, is if everybody could find the chat button at the very bottom of your screen. When you click that chat button, a little window will pop up. Make sure that in the drop down, that little blue drop down, that you choose everyone. I don't know what the default is, but just make sure you choose everyone. And this is the way that you can communicate with us during the chat. If you have any questions or you have any comments, please put them into the chat and we will take the time to answer those for you today. So again, this presentation, this webinar is going to be recorded. It is being recorded right now, and this will be posted up on our YouTube channel. So if you need to watch it again, if you'd like to watch it again, or if you'd like to share this with somebody else, this will be available later. So that's kind of our little introduction here to our job loss survival guide. So we hope that you're going to be able to walk away with some tools for financial resilience and recovery.
And I also wanted to mention we're going to be sharing a copy of the PowerPoint at the end of our session. So you will have access to these slides. You don't need to take tons of notes while we go. You can just focus on the presentation and you'll have these materials for reference later.
Great. So we're very happy today at ACC to welcome a couple panelists with us today who are going to be kind of walking us through this. Again, here at ACCC, we are kind of experts on credit and kind of debt management. So we love to bring in other voices. And so I'd like to welcome Andy Della Santa and Melissa Vining to our presentation.
Hi, Marika. Thank you for having us. My name is Andy Della Santa. I am one of the financial coaches here at JVS Boston. I work as a financial coach for mostly recent refugees, immigrants, low-income individuals, and unemployed folks around the Boston area to help them navigate their personal finances.
And my name is Melissa Vining, also happy to be here. I am a senior career coach for the MassHire Downtown Boston Career Center. So I do a lot of one-on-one coaching with individuals who are on the job search and also develop a lot of content for our webinars that we host through the Career Center. So happy to be here.
And I'd like to introduce our third person here, Adalberto. Adalberto will not be presenting today, but he's going to be doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff for us today. So Adalberto, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Marika. My name is Adalberto. I'm the manager of the Financial Opportunity Center here at JVS. I'm so excited to having us here. And also, I'm going to make sure that you guys have the links in the chat. So you want to copy all those links while you watching the slides, go ahead. And anyway, as Melissa mentioned, we are going to share that information after this webinar. Thank you.
Great. So a little bit about our organization, if this is the first time you've joined us for a presentation, if you're just kind of found out about us, our organization is called American Consumer Credit Counseling, and we're a nonprofit organization, again, based out of Boston, similar to my colleagues here from JVS Boston and MassHire Downtown Boston. But we're a national organization, and really our mission is to really empower people, to give them the tools and the knowledge to be really able to regain control of the quality of their life through their financial decisions. So again, I focus with the financial education side in my community outreach. But if in going through all of this, you are kind of struggling a little bit with your credit, or you're struggling a little bit with your debt, please feel free to reach out to our organization. You can find us at theconsumercredit.com, or you can give us a call at 866, that 866 number. And we'd be more than happy to kind of help walk you through your budget, or kind of any kind of a debt management. If you kind of helping you with your debt is a possibility. We also do pre and post bankruptcy counseling, as well as doing some housing counseling. So we are kind of there for you. Again, we are a national, so we have national people around the United States who can assist you with this.
And Andy and Adalberto and I are here representing JVS and MassHire Downtown Boston. So just a little bit about us. JVS Boston is a workforce development agency in the city of Boston, and our mission is really to empower individuals and employers to help everyone in their job search and their search for workers. So we kind of serve both ends. MassHire Downtown Boston is the career center within JVS Boston. So we are part of the national network of one-stop career centers, and we're going to be going over some more of that information in today's session as well. And we are one of the 21 MassHire career centers around the state of Massachusetts. So we exist to empower job seekers with cutting-edge knowledge and resources for the job search. So this is something that we do all the time. We work with people mostly who are unemployed, like many of you probably are. So hopefully we can give you some great resources and strategies in our session today. All right, so in our session, we are going to go over kind of these 4 steps that you want to take when you become unemployed. And when you get into this situation, one of the first things that we're going to recommend is that you start by applying for unemployment insurance benefits. And some of you may have already taken that step. So this is important to do as soon as possible after you become unemployed, because it does sometimes take a few weeks for those benefits to kick in. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today too. Then we want to encourage you to seek job search guidance at your local one-stop career center. And you may be, an expert in your field, but most likely you're not an expert in job searching. So we want to make sure that you are being connected with some of those people who are experts in the career and job search space, so you can hopefully move through this process a little bit faster. And then, of course, one of our main goals of today's session is to really make sure that you understand what to do with your finances in terms of securing your financial health, and then also rebuilding financial stability, even through this period of unemployment. So starting with the first part of this, applying for UI benefits. So unemployment insurance is a joint state and federal program, and it's meant to provide temporary financial assistance to individuals who have become unemployed through no fault of their own. So every state is going to have its own guidelines in terms of eligibility, benefit amounts, and the length of time that benefits can be paid. So because we have people in our group today that are most likely from all over the country, we don't have necessarily specific information for you about your state's unemployment process. But we do have this linked here in the PowerPoint, and we're going to be sharing it with you at the end of our session. So you can come to this website and take a look at what you need to know for your specific state. One of the important things to know here is that the career centers are not the people who administer the unemployment assistance program. So a lot of the times clients come to us and they're confused about this, because they think that we are the people who are making decisions about unemployment insurance, and they're coming to us with questions about that. So as you go through this process and start to apply for unemployment insurance benefits, and if you do run into any issues or have questions, we want to make sure that you're going directly to the Department of Unemployment Assistance, or whatever they're called in your specific state, rather than to a career center. So that's going to help you kind of speed up this process. The career centers do have partnerships with the unemployment departments in each state, and we'll kind of talk about what that looks like too, but just making sure that you're contacting the right people for the right questions. It's also important to realize that the unemployment benefits are taxable, and I'm going to hand it over to Andy to kind of talk more about that.
Yeah, thank you. So again, as Melissa mentioned, unemployment benefits are taxable. So you always want to make sure that you do elect your federal and state taxes if they apply. Not all states have state income tax. So if you do, just be sure to apply those. Sometimes they are automatically set to certain percentages. So I remember when I was even unemployed, they were automatically set to 10% for federal and 5% for state here. But if you do want them to change, just be aware that you have the ability to change them and you can do them right when you sign up for those benefits. Typically, it'll be through your state website. At the end of the year, you will get what's called a 1099-G, and that's basically your tax form to state your income that you receive through the unemployment benefits. Be sure to save that for your taxes, and then we encourage you to save all tax records for about 3 to 5 years afterwards, too.
All right, so after you go through the process of applying for the unemployment insurance, typically there's going to be what's called a waiting period. So usually that's going to be between like 2 and 3 weeks before those benefits start to kick in. Sometimes we get questions about, am I eligible for these benefits and things like that. And we always want to encourage you to contact the Department of Unemployment Assistance or just to go ahead and apply, because that's usually going to be the fastest way to find out if you get approval or not. So don't let it hold you back. If you're thinking, I'm not quite sure if I'm eligible, go ahead and apply anyway, and then they can make that determination. Once you start receiving benefits, in many cases, and this is going to be state by state, but especially here in Massachusetts, when people start to receive those unemployment insurance benefits, they then get a letter from the Department of Unemployment Assistance saying, you need to use Career Center services in order to maintain these benefits. So this is one of the really important things, because when you start to receive the benefits, you never want to ignore any communications from the Department of Unemployment Assistance. What sometimes happens is that people will come in to our Career Center and say, my benefits got cut off and I'm not really sure what I missed. I'm not sure why. And a lot of the times it's because they didn't meet those specific requirements. And each state is going to have different requirements, but they're going to tell you this is what you need to do on an ongoing basis to make sure that you're meeting those requirements. So check your email, check your phone messages, make sure that you're getting their communication and that you're following those steps as soon as possible when you get that. One of the requirements in Massachusetts is to use specific Career Center services. So this is actually great for job seekers because it introduces you to the career centers, which can help you move through this process of unemployment and your job search faster and more effectively. So oftentimes in the Career Center, and this is going to vary from center to center, but you're going to find services like career exploration and planning support. So if you're in the situation where you're not really sure what the next steps are for you in your career, or you want to make a career change, or you're thinking, something wasn't quite right and I want to be able to move forward and grow, they can help you with planning that out and thinking about the different steps you need to take in order to meet those goals. There's also going to be connections to education and training resources. And this can be so helpful, especially when you're thinking about your budgeting and even your future finances in terms of how can I increase my salary and increase my earning potential. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes when I go over a little bit more information about training opportunities. They're also going to have job search assistance, and that might be anything from resume reviews, interview preparation. Many of the career centers will have coaches that are specifically there to meet with people who are looking for jobs one-on-one and really help them figure out how can I do this the most effective and efficient way. So the job search process and the best practices they're constantly changing and evolving. And this is something that we see so often where people come in, and even if, let's say, they had job searched a year ago, things have changed since then. So by coming to the people at the Career Center, you're going to be getting the most up-to-date information that's going to help you in this process. They also have workshops, job fairs, hiring events a lot of the time. So many of the career centers will be connected with employer partners, and those are going to be the businesses, especially those local ones that are looking to hire people right now. So going to some of these events can be so helpful to you in getting connected to some of those opportunities. All of the career centers across the country are mandated to have resource rooms. So those will have access to computers, internet, printers. You can go in and use those resources for anything related to your job search. So if you're in the position where you don't have access to a computer or internet, or you need to print a resume for an interview, go into those resource centers and resource rooms, because that's going to be the best place to get access to those things. You can even bring in your computer if you have one and you just need internet, and you can use the internet there. A lot of the times they will also have staff on site who can help you and answer some questions related to your job search. So definitely take advantage of all of those resources. The career centers also have specialized priority service for veterans and for eligible family members. So if that does apply to you, you want to mention that when you go into the career center, and they can help get you connected with some of those resources. So we do have a link here, and Adalberto is going to share it in the chat too, on how to search for your local career center. So just make sure you're looking for the one that's closest to where you live, and they should be able to help you with all of these things. So we just want to go over a little bit about the job search process in general, because this is a process. This is something that sometimes goes on for longer than we expect, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too. But one of the important things that I see in working with job seekers every day is that when people become unemployed, they tend to get into this mode where they're thinking, I need a job, and I'm just going to dive right into finding jobs and applying. And as you can see, this is kind of way later in this process. So when people skip through all of these other 5 steps that come before, it tends to actually slow things down and make it harder to get hired in the next position. So we want to encourage you to really take a step back and start at the beginning with clarifying your strengths and values. This is so important, because even if you're coming into this thinking, I kind of know what those are, I'm really organized, I approach things in a certain way, these are my strengths. If you haven't really taken the time to dig into this and to really write this down and clarify this for yourself, it actually makes the rest of this process harder. So we want to start off by doing some brainstorming around what are the skills that you have from your previous work experience that you want to carry through to the next steps in your career. What are the strengths you have that help you be successful with those skills? So when we're thinking about skills, that's something that you do, and strengths are how you approach that thing. Those are the traits that you have that help you be successful with that. So for me, I develop a lot of our curriculum for our career center. That is a skill that I do, curriculum development. My strengths underneath that help me in that skill are that I'm really deliberative and intentional with everything I do. I'm a learner, and I want to gather all of this information and put it into a process that really makes sense for people. So that's kind of where the discipline comes in, because I create these processes around everything. So it's really about my unique way of approaching that. The other part of this is the values. And when we talk about values, we're really thinking about what is important to you in the next steps in your career. So that's going to change over time. Maybe right now there's a certain salary that you really need. Maybe in the future you need more flexibility and you're not as worried about salary. So thinking through what is important to me right now, and how can I then identify target jobs and employers that are going to support me in those things? So, a lot of the times, what I hear from people who are unemployed is that they say, I just need a job. It doesn't matter what it is. And I want to leave it really open because it feels like that might make it easier. And the thing is that on the other side of that, it actually makes it harder because when you're less clear about the types of jobs you're looking for, there is less clarity for the person on the other side. There's less clarity for the employer, for the hiring managers, for the recruiters. And they might be looking at your resume and it kind of shows you're a jack of all trades. And they're thinking, what are these person's actual skills? What is it that they want to be doing? And why is it that they're applying to this job? So by starting off being really clear about one or maybe two very specific target jobs is going to help you then communicate all of the great value you have to the employer. Also, thinking about target employers is a really useful strategy here because then it's not just about all of the different opportunities that might be available, but you can narrow this down from industry to industry, or maybe there are specific employers that really align with your values, and you can focus more of your time and energy on applying to those places, networking with people within those places, following them to make sure that you're first when a job does pop up, you see it right away. You also may want to consider gaining new skills, and this can be really helpful if you're looking to potentially shift into a new career space or make some kind of transition, if you're looking to move forward in your career, or especially for people who were laid off because of a change in the world of work. So there's all of these changes, especially that have happened within the past several years. And we see that the landscape has shifted so much that sometimes the job you had is no longer available. So in that case, you may need to gain new skills in order to be able to move into something that is more in demand in today's workforce. Then, of course, once we've clarified all of those things and built that foundation, we can move into more of the actual tangible job search. So that's where we're thinking about updating your resume, cover letter, LinkedIn, and making sure that, again, you're finding resources around this, because it can be really easy to fall into the trap of thinking, I'm just going to do it the way I did it last time I job searched, 10 years ago or whatever it was. And things have changed so much that all of a sudden you're not using the best practices that we want to see, that we know employers are responding to. So make sure that you're getting the updated information, whether that's through your local career center or online. There are a lot of different sources, but just make sure that you're verifying some of this with multiple sources, because there is so much out there that there is great information and sometimes not as great information. So check in multiple places and make sure that you're kind of approaching this in the most effective way that you can. We also know that networking is a really important part of this process, and this tends to be a stumbling block for a lot of people because it sometimes just feels like a really scary thing to do. But we know that there's data that tells us up to 85% of jobs are actually gained through networking. So this is such an important part that you don't want to neglect in this process. So making sure that you are reaching out to your current network, that you're intentionally trying to expand your network and thinking about how can you connect with people who maybe work for your target employers or do work that's really interesting to you. And then once you've started to do all of these things, that's the point where you can go find jobs and apply. One tip that I want to give you for this is never to apply to a job through an online job board. We know from our conversations with employers that they are prioritizing people who apply directly through their websites. So even if you find a job on an external job board, you always want to go back to the employer website. One, verify that it's a legitimate posting, because if it is, it will show up on the employer's website. verify that it's a current posting, because if it is, it will show up on the employer's website, and then apply there because they're going to look at those applications first. Then, of course, we kind of close out this process with interviewing, evaluating, and negotiating. And those are going to come a little bit later, but also something that your career center can help you prepare for. So obviously, when we think about all of those different steps, we can see that this is a process that does take time. And it takes time not only on the job seeker side, but also on the employer side. So there is some data out there that says a hiring process for an employer takes at least 30 days, if not more. And I've seen averages, between 30 and 90 days in some cases. So that's where you are applying and the time goes by and they're doing the interviewing and they're doing the evaluation, and the time until you actually start on the job can be, of course, at a minimum 30 days. So this takes time on both sides. And as we can see from the data on the screen here, the average amount of time it takes to get hired in a new job is 5.5 months. And that's thinking about the time you become unemployed until the time that you start a new job. So we want to set realistic expectations around this because this is a surprise to a lot of people. We talk to people every day who come in and they say, I've been unemployed for 2 months. It's terrible. It feels like forever. And yes, that's true. It is terrible. It does feel like forever, but it is actually very normal if your job search takes many months. And, depending on your industry and depending on at what point you are in your career, all of those things come into play too. And in a lot of cases, this may even take up to a year. So it's important to recognize that, one, it's normal for this to take time, but you also have to take this into account when you're budgeting, because we don't want you to budget just thinking that this is going to be a month-long process and then all of a sudden 6 months later, you're still unemployed. Andy, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we talk about budgeting too, and unemployment obviously doesn't last forever. But at least when I see with my clients who are unemployed, oftentimes, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, that we think of those bridge roles and those part-time jobs as possibly hindering some unemployment benefits, right? Because if we get income while we're unemployed, it might reduce some of those benefits. But oftentimes, when those benefits do run out, then we do have to rely on those types of bridge jobs, which we'll talk about later. So just be open to those possibilities too, at the idea of just being patient with the process, as Melissa mentioned.
All right, so while you're going through this process, we also want to give you some tips here for coping with job search stress, because obviously this is a stressful process, and we've just talked about how long this can take, and so many areas of your life are impacted by this, finances, but also a lot of other things. So you want to first start by kind of shifting your mindset on this and focus on what you can control, because there is a lot of this process that is outside of your control. So you cannot control other candidates. You cannot control the employers and their decisions. You cannot control what happens in the workforce, but you can control your responses to those things. You can control whether you decide to do some additional training. You can control your preparation, your networking, how you're setting yourself up for success in this job search. So think about, when you encounter some of these stresses, is this actually something I can control or is it not? And this can be easier said than done, but you want to think about letting go of the things that you can't and refocusing your time and energy on those things that will actually move you forward. We always encourage everyone to seek mental health support if needed, because this can cause a lot of mental health issues that may not have been a problem for you while you were employed. Everything has changed when you become unemployed, and that just causes all of this extra stress. There's actually a study that was done that showed that so many people, when they go through the unemployment process have all of these mental health implications that come along with this. So we want to make sure to address those up front, because if you don't start there, it becomes so much harder to actually make progress and really run an effective job search. You also want to make time for wellness overall. So even if you are not in the situation where you think you need mental health support, doing some of these wellness practices can help you be more effective in your job search. So don't just think about the fact that you need to job search 24/7, because that's not really going to be effective. There's going to be a point where it actually is more negative than it is positive. So make time for yourself too. Think about exercise, nutrition, sleep, and within all of this, establishing a consistent daily routine. This can be so important because a lot of our routine is built around our work. So if you're no longer working, all of a sudden your routine is completely different. So establishing this for yourself can help you really have these kind of checkpoints throughout your day to say, okay, now is the time when I'm working on my job search. Now is the time when I'm working on my own health and wellness. Now is the time when I'm providing for my family. All of those other things that you need to do that are just as important in your life. You also might want to think about finding a new purpose, because similar to the daily routine, a lot of our purpose tends to be really wrapped up in our work. So thinking about things like volunteering, doing some training or professional development, maybe some hobbies that you really enjoy. Those things can be so helpful, not only just for your own stress reduction and mental health, but they're also helpful in the job search, especially when you're thinking about volunteering and training. That can help you make more connections, do more networking in a really kind of organic way, and also gives you something to put on your applications, to put on your resume, to talk about in your interviews. So this can be helpful in so many different ways. Also making daily social connections, because again, like the other two things that I just talked about, social connections can sometimes be very heavily tied in with our workplace. So all of a sudden you don't have people that you're talking with every day at work, and you need to be more intentional about actually making those connections with people. Of course, we also want you to set goals for this process and then make sure you celebrate when you achieve them, because kind of marking that achievement can really help motivate you to continue moving forward, especially when this can be so stressful and it can be really negative in a lot of ways. So anytime you can find this positive and the fact that you've achieved those goals, take some time to celebrate that, even if it's something small like treating yourself to a dessert or going out with your friends. Do something to say, I achieved this. We also want to think about, as part of this process, potentially increasing your earning potential. And this is something that can be really helpful for you as you're thinking about your long-term financial goals. So especially, like I mentioned earlier, if you're thinking about growing in your career, maybe earning more or shifting into a new career, you can use some of these training opportunities to help you do that. So there are a lot of different ways that you can access training and funding for that training. One of the big ways, and one of the things that we support through the One Stop Career Center system, is what's called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So this is a national system that's organized by the U.S. Department of Labor, and it provides training grants to job seekers who are looking to improve their skills. So there are specific requirements in order to get some of this grant funding, but in many cases, you can actually get a training grant that will cover the cost of a program so that you can gain new skills or potentially shift into a new field. So this is definitely something to explore, and make sure you do that with your career center. In some cases, there may also be opportunities to extend your unemployment insurance benefits by participating in an approved training program. So, because of that, you want to make sure to explore this as soon as possible once you start to collect unemployment insurance, because there are going to be certain deadlines and a timeline that you'll need to meet in order to have that potential extension. We also have some other resources here and those that Adalberto put in the chat for us. So you can explore some of these other options for training and training grants and, free training. We always want to try to provide you with as many free resources as we can. So these are some other options for that.
And as Melissa was mentioning, mental health is very important that we focus on. And I always am a big proponent that we have three major healths in our lives. We have our physical health, our mental health, but we cannot forget our financial health as well. Okay. And that financial health, they all do play a part in each other, right? And so we really want to pay attention to our financial health as well. Okay. When we lose a job, our job loss can affect many aspects in our life. All right. If you're single, it may have been your only form of income. If for couples or families, okay, it still may be a large source of income, and it's important to take financial action as soon as possible. Okay, so beyond applying for unemployment assistance, right, the insurance, you also want to look for other local, state, and federal resources available to you. Okay, we're going to share some great resources on that. But for example, student loans, if you have federal student loans, one of the first things you want to do is look to immediately apply for the economic hardship forbearance. Okay. And that will put off your loan payments, right? They will get them down to zero. I know there's a lot of legislation and conversation going on with federal loans, but that is one thing you want to start thinking about if you are unemployed, is to put that in forbearance immediately. Okay. Again, that is federal. They do offer some services for private loans. Not all companies do, though. So don't hold me to that. But some companies, it doesn't hurt to ask. Okay. Utility programs, again, look to they often the providers themselves will have programs within them, right? So, like for example, here we have EverSource, National Grid. A lot of those companies will have hardship programs within them and reduce payments or delay them for a certain period of time. There are also, private or third-party programs like you can see here that offer those assistance as well. Okay. Know your rights too. Okay. For example, here in Massachusetts, it is illegal for utility companies to shut off utilities if a child is in the house. Okay. That's just one example, but there are a lot of rights regarding payments. Okay. If you were to miss payments on certain things, just know that you do have rights beyond a lot of things. And there are free legal services as well out there that can help you with them. Okay. If you receive a notice to quit or you're still worried about losing housing, there are rent relief and assistance programs in every state. Okay. You can find them through the HUD website. All right. But again, there's also private third-party programs that can try to help as well. Okay. When you lose your job, sometimes people do receive severance packages, which is excellent. That's great to hear. And sometimes they will include access to health insurance still. Okay. But if you no longer have health insurance, check out your state or federal plans. Okay, you can find that through the federal healthcare system, through the healthcare.gov, or it will redirect you through your state connector. Okay, from there you will find low to no cost plans that will ensure that you still have health insurance. Okay, Cobra is an option as well you can have out there. It's going to be very expensive. So that's why I would always recommend looking for those federal or state programs first. For food assistance, absolutely look for SNAP benefits. There's WIC. Look for local food pantries. Okay, these programs are here for a reason. It's to help those who temporarily need their help. Okay, and so it is very important that if you do need their help, please reach out. Okay, because that's what they are designed to do. All right, and as I mentioned earlier, consider that possible bridge role. Again, I know that if you are receiving unemployment insurance benefits, that if you do start to have some type of income, whether it's a part-time job or, gig work, it could reduce some of those benefits. But I have clients who still said, I went out and got that part-time job even though I was getting unemployment, and it ended up leading to better connections, right? I have a lot of clients who started working part-time at temp agencies and then eventually became full-time temps. And then from there, they ended up getting full-time benefited jobs directly with that company. Okay, so don't discount just the dollar figure of the job, but also the connections you can build. Okay. And I do want to just mention again with what Melissa mentioned, volunteering, you might find a new passion in your life, right? Finding different ways that, and different purposes that you love could open up new doors that you never knew were even possible for you. Okay. Not to sound too cliche, but it is definitely a reality. Okay. So as you're thinking about the assistance programs that are available, it's also good to go through all of the expenses you have, not just the ones that you feel might have programs out there, but everything. Okay. And so the reason why I say that is because every reoccurring expense you have, whether it's your car insurance, whether it's your cell phone bill, it doesn't hurt to check to see if they have a hardship program too. You never know unless either you ask or do a quick search on their website. Okay. Randomly, companies will have those programs available to you. Okay. I know there used to be the Affordable Connectivity Program that helped folks reduce their internet bill, right? That program unfortunately ended, but that's just an example of programs out there that could help in other ways other than just federal cash, right? Or other assistance programs. All right. So check to see if any of your expenses have those programs, right? And once you go through that, you're really going to look at the process of what is essential and what's not essential for your budget. Okay. A lot of folks fight me on this, but is Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts an essential product, right? Yes, coffee might help you with your sanity. I can absolutely attest to that. I understand it. But the question is, you know, how much could that hurt your budget, right? And so is it a matter of making it at home? Not stopping it completely, right? But do we still need that caffeine? Can we get it other ways? Can we make our coffee at home? Is it going to be cheaper? Okay. Also downgrading services. Again, if you have the latest iPhone and you're making monthly payments for it, is it okay, for your own sanity to downgrade to a different, phone to get a free phone? Okay. Ignoring FOMO and, keeping up with the Joneses and having the next best thing, it can benefit your wallet. Okay. Typically, if we just try to have the next best thing in life, typically just leaves us in more debt. Okay. And just remember that it's only temporary, right? Being unemployed is just a temporary process. And so any changes you make to your budget is going to be temporary too, right? We're not asking you to cut out takeout for the rest of your life, just maybe starting to work on reducing it in the short term. And then eventually, those good habits will compound over time.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, that's a great lead in for, why we actually here at ACCC invited you to come to this webinar, why we thought this was so important. At our organization, what we really see is that when people contact us and they're looking for some budget assistance and credit counseling, and they're really kind of struggling with some of their debt, the job loss and job reduction is one of the biggest kind of reasons that kind of tip people over into that debt, that higher debt category. And so that idea, like you had said, really sitting down with your budget to determine, okay, what are my necessary expenses? What assistance can I get to kind of cover some of those? And then, like you said, looking really hard look at some of those things that we've kind of have in our life that we like, that we can begin to think about cutting out. Because one of the things that you really want to do is make sure that you're keeping up with your debt, that you're not falling behind with your debt payments. So Adalberto put in the chat for you, and that will be shared at the end of the presentation as well with a follow-up email. But just sit down when in part of your unemployment process should really be to sit down and really begin to understand what are your monthly debt obligations, car loans, personal loans, credit card balances. What do you owe at this point? What can you put on hold for a little bit? And then what do you need to put into that budget? It is at this time, a lot of people kind of when things like this happen, people use credit cards as loans. They use that as kind of a spillover, a way to kind of manage their expenses. The interest rate on credit cards is so high that you're kind of digging yourself deeper and deeper in. And as Melissa had said, this process is sometimes a couple months. So it's not a couple weeks, it's a couple months. So you have to see kind of the longer picture of this with your budgeting, with cutting expenses, but also looking at not looking at your debt that you're carrying currently, as well as not building yourself deeper into debt. We do recommend really putting your cards away if possible and only using them kind of for emergencies or kind of things that you need to kind of cover, and to really try to focus on using cash or using your debit card as much as possible. Use what you have and kind of limit down. And again, as Andy had said, temporarily while you kind of get your feet under you and can kind of figure things out. On that debt payment tracker document that we shared, you can, if you print that out, what you can do is it's really good to know your credit card APR. It's really good to know your credit card interest rates, because what you want to do is if you have to use your credit card, you want to use your lowest rate interest cards rather than putting it on a high rate interest card, because then again, you're going to be paying more interest on that. And it's going to be harder if you're only able to make the minimum payment and not really kind of pay off those balances. And then as Andy had said as well, one of the big pieces, really sitting down to look at your budget and really begin to go through and track and make sure you know all of those little expenses. We many times can kind of guesstimate our budget. We know what our fixed expenses are, like our monthly rent or our car payments. We know about what we spend per month in gas or in, food. We have an estimation. But if you can sit down and look at where all of your money goes, where all of your dollars go, that's where you can really begin to make some determinations as to, I'm going to cut back on this, or I'm going to cut down on this. And really what we recommend is that, especially during this period, that you find a budgeting system where you track everything. So, and again, one size does not fit all. So for some people, they're paper and pencil people. They like to be able to kind of see everything and write it out. So if that works for you, that's great. Some people like to have a spreadsheet. They like to have it on the computer and be able to kind of put the numbers in, and the calculation does it for themselves. Adalberto has shared, we have here at ACCC, we have a household budgeting spreadsheet that you could use. It's kind of pictured here. Also Google Drive, if you happen to have Google, under Google Drive, they have Google Sheets, has a great annual and monthly budget that you can get for free. So if you're a spreadsheet person, I would recommend really sitting down with your expenses. So we're getting near the end of July here. So what you could do is go back and kind of do your June budget. What did you spend in June and what have you spent so far in July? And then begin to have, if it's you yourself, begin to make those determinations. If it's part of a family piece, have that conversation about kind of what you're cutting back and cutting down. The third option we have here is a budgeting app. Some people don't like paper and pencil. Some people don't work as well with spreadsheets. They really use their phones a lot. And so ACCC actually developed its own budgeting app called Credit You. And so again, the link to that is in the chat, so you can check that out if you would like. But there are a lot of different budgeting apps out there, but it's something that you want to keep on top of your budget. Sometimes in times like this, it's very traumatic and it's very stressful, and our kind of natural reaction to this is to kind of avoid it. We don't want to know how bad it is. We want to avoid it. We don't really want to see it, but sometimes you will have a greater sense of control if you can see everything in front of you and you kind of know where everything's going. So that's the challenge, is to kind of find a way that works best for you and then kind of see if that works.
And so once we know exactly what we're going to be spending on and kind of deciding on what's the essentials, non-essentials, it's really also about figuring out the priorities, right? What's going to be paid first this month, not just based on the due date, but also based on priority. Okay, so living expenses are always going to be the highest priority. You always want to focus on paying those first. Okay, if you can, try to apply for those hardship programs first, because they can offset some of these costs, like we mentioned earlier. After you have your living expenses covered and set aside for the month, really focus on paying at least the minimums to cover for your debt payments. Okay, always focus on within this, focus on your mortgages and your car loans first, right? Protect the assets if you can. From there, then focus on the credit card minimums. I will always be the first to say federal student loans will always come last, right? Because typically they have the lower interest rates and they will also have the most flexibility with forbearance and hardship programs. Okay. If you do have the ability to save, keep doing so. I know it might sound crazy that if you're unemployed, you have a little extra cash, but believe me, it is actually possible. Okay. And so if you do have some sort of, even if it's a small amount, $5, $10, $20, starting to put that away for other emergencies is best, right? Because we don't expect all emergencies to happen at once, and loss of income is the biggest emergency typically. Knock on wood, sometimes emergencies can happen at the same time. So if by the chance you need a new water heater, you need new tires in your car, right? Or if there's a health emergency, it's still good to think about saving some up for that as well. Okay. We expect the best, but we have to prepare for the worst, right? So always keep that in mind. And then the last thing at the bottom is going to be your extras. That's going to be all the non-essentials that you need. It's the things that make life more enjoyable, but it's going to be the things that hurt your budget the most. Okay. And so try to reduce or eliminate them completely. And then when you're looking to cut expenses, we just work in opposite order. So paying, we work from top down. And then from cutting things back, we work from bottom up. So cut the extras first and then work our way up.
And one of the other pieces that you want to do in protecting your future kind of in this time period is that you want to make sure that you're really protecting your credit report and your credit score, that you're able to maintain it at this time and keep it in a good place for the future. So it really is recommended, again, to really know what's going on with you right now. And if you are able to pull your credit reports, I should say, across the three credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, just have a look at everything because the credit report is your complete financial picture. It will tell you all open accounts. It will tell you your credit limits. It will tell you how much you currently owe. It will keep, if you're needing to sit down and kind of like do that debt payment plan, your credit report is, you won't need to pull out a million different documents to try to figure everything out. Your credit report will have it kind of all in one place. So that's a big recommendation, is to pull that credit report to make sure it's up to date, and so that you know that that's your priority after your basic living expenses. As I said previously, we just want to make sure that when you are looking at that kind of the debt that you're carrying and the debt that you want to kind of make sure that you're kind of handling, that you're trying not to take on any new debt in addition. So try to kind of, again, focus more on cash and debit and try to limit some of your credit card use. The biggest piece for maintaining your credit report, the two biggest pieces are making sure that you have on-time payments, even if it's just the minimum payment, just to make sure that that gets done. Don't miss any credit card payments. And the second thing is trying to keep your credit utilization a little bit low. So you don't want to spend too much. If you have your credit limit on your credit card, you don't want to spend too much to get up to the credit limit, because that's going to lower your credit score, and then that will impact you in different ways. So if you can at this time, I know each situation is different, but if you can at this time, try to avoid opening new lines of credit to cover your living expenses. It's better to try to cut those living expenses, or as Andy and Melissa had spoken about, finding that kind of bridging job to bring in some extra money rather than trying to put it on the credit cards, because when you sit down and do the math on the interest rates, it's just the interest rates are too high. You're just digging yourself deeper and deeper into debt.
And in terms of retirement, that is going to be the last thing you want to think of taking money from. Okay. So retirement, yes, it is an asset for your future, but we want to make sure that we use that as the last priority. Okay. Typically, when you have a retirement account with a former employer, you have four options, depending on how much you have in there, right? But typically the four options is you can keep it where it is, it will stay and grow. The second is you can roll it over to your new employer, or the third, you can roll it over into an IRA. Okay. The fourth option is to take it out and cash it out. But trust me, the tax implications and the withdrawal penalties will eat up the gains. Okay. So it's very important that we do not withdraw from our retirement if possible. Because oftentimes, and as Marika mentioned about debt programs, oftentimes it is actually more feasible to consider a debt relief program rather, or your different debt options rather than taking the cash out of the retirement, because it's not just going to be the straight cash coming out. You're going to have to pay the penalties and the tax income too.
Right. And if that's something that you need to consider or are considering before you kind of walk down that path, please contact a credit counseling agency like American Consumer Credit Counseling. It's a free and confidential credit assessment to kind of really see where you are, to see if that debt management program is the best option for you right now to protect, because what we're trying to do is protect your future. And if you're dipping into that retirement, you're putting kind of some of that at risk.
So as we get down here in time for the webinar, we want to think of the future too, right? We want to start thinking about rebuilding that financial stability in the future. So when that day comes, when you do land your next job, right, we want to reassess our goals, all right? And we want to reassess what we want to work towards. I always tell my clients, it's more important that the comeback is bigger than the setback, okay? Being unemployed can be a temporary setback, but as long as your comeback story is bigger, that's all that matters, right? And so when you get to that point and you're thinking about your goals, it's important to start thinking about covering your expenses and start saving up in case of emergency again, right? Having that 3 to 6 months of emergency savings, getting current with all your bills, and trying to reduce as much debt as possible.
Right. And so that idea moving forward, like we said, the job search process can take, a couple months. And so having that emergency fund, rebuilding that emergency fund is incredibly important. And so just to kind of wrap us up here today, just to go back through those steps again. So if you face unemployment, the first thing you want to do is really apply for unemployment insurance benefits. The second thing you want to do, and these are all kind of maybe done in the same day. It doesn't necessarily need to be kind of one after the other. You kind of do them all in the same day or all in that same time period. You do want to seek out some type of job search guidance. As Melissa very clearly stated that, the employment landscape is very complex, and to try to do it on your own can be very frustrating and it cannot be as effective. So really reaching out to try to figure out what's the best path for you. Sitting down to really nurture your financial health, to map out your budget, cut your expenses, and track your debt, and check on your credit. And again, the reason why ACCC brought in MassHire, Downtown Boston, and JVS Boston, these are great partnerships that we have. Andy is a financial coach. He works with people to do this exactly. So if you're in the Boston area, that's great, but look around, find those resources around you. Are there financial coaches in your area who can kind of sit down with you and help you walk through this? If you're kind of struggling with your debt, reach out to a debt management program like our organization to see if you can get some help. And then the last piece is just really like, once you land that job, just walk away from this experience with that idea of like what you're going to do to prepare if this ever happens again. So. And then just to wrap us up here, if you like what you've heard, we have a monthly webinar series here at ACCC. Our August webinar is going to be back to school budgeting. So many schools maybe will be just going back or kind of after Labor Day. So we're a little bit late with our August back to school budgeting, but always good to have some tips and tricks. So you can check us out at consumercredit.com, and then you can go to resources and tools and webinars. So that's the next in our series. And then thank you again so much for joining us. Here linked, Adalberto will put this in, and you can check out each of our own organizations and find out more about us. And then Adalberto has put into the chat, we would love some feedback. So there is a job form survey. If you click on that, it will kind of give us some feedback on the webinar. And at the very end, it will say if you want to kind of stay in touch with ACCC and get on our monthly newsletter, we'll kind of just put your name and your email, and we will add you to our monthly newsletter. So I do want to kind of take some time right now to really thank Melissa, Andy, and Adalberto for taking so much time to help us kind of prepare this webinar, organize this webinar, give this webinar. So thank you so much for all of your time and your expertise for joining us today.